Welcome to lesson number 11 in the B book, and we are working on page 26 and 27 today. We're beginning fifths, and the other piece that we're working on, not piece, but the other exercise we're doing is on page 14 in the technique book. No solo book this week. We're learning our last interval, and this one is a very important interval. It's a fifth. If you've noticed all the way through, up until now, we have been working in these 5-finger positions, which means the kids are doing they're either here for 5 fingers at a time, here for 5 fingers, and as we go, and we call them positions. This is middle C position, this is C position. In 2 weeks, we're going to start G position, and it's also a 5-finger position. So make sure they're learning their notes too, because we're getting closer to adding 7 more. So make sure that they can say what these are. That'll really help them be less frustrated. So why 5-finger positions? Not everybody learns in positions. Years ago, we didn't do this. We just went in and just read the notes and played them and decoded them and just memorized them. But one of the reasons why I think that the 5-finger position is so important with a prep course with very small children is that we need to get the feel of what these feel like, this fifth interval. Their fingers are growing. They grow at a very fast rate, and so they need to know what it feels like. If they have a growth spurt relative to the piano, that's going to change. Their hand's going to get bigger, and the piano is not. So the piano doesn't grow with the child, but their hands grow. This is why you don't want to put the piano down and then come back to it, 5 or 6 years later, because when they're small children, because all of a sudden they're going to go back to the piano, and the keys are going to seem much smaller, and they're going to have to adjust it. And we're going to have to relearn a lot of the work that we have been doing with daily practice work. So we've been feeling what a second feels like, what a third feels like, what a fourth feels like, and the distance between those. And now we're doing fifth. And the fifth is really important because of the 5-finger position, and because most of our chords, they almost always have a first and a fifth in the chord. Sometimes we'll have a perfect fourth, which is, if you notice, it's the same note, but this is what we call a perfect fifth in music. And there's lots of things we could talk about with that, but just trust me when I say that this 5 fingers interval position is really important to know what it is. You can even have them practice this at home. We'll probably be doing this at the lesson just to get that feel so that they can have a nice strong reach, and so that they memorize that reach, because as we bounce, we tend to keep these 5-finger positions. So this music is actually pretty easy. They're going to sight read through this and this as well. We just need to make sure that we're paying attention to the rhythm, and obviously we're going to start with the right hand. It's mezzo forte all the way through, so it's going to start with the C, C, and G, G. So it's 1, 1, 5, 5, back to 1, 1, half note, and now we're going to practice our harmonics, our chords. Fourth, fourth, fifth, there it is. And then the left hand is just the same. I believe so. Yes, the left hand is just the same, so it mirrors. The left hand is actually more important with learning these chords, because generally in music our melody is here, and so these fingers are moving one at a time. But these, we tend to play chords in our left hand. So if you need to practice just a touch on it, do these. Just practice these 2 measures. All right, the next song. These are also chords, starts with forte. The echo in the left hand is almost the same. It's not quite, the rhythm is a little bit different, but it's the same idea. And since it sounds a little bit like an echo, it's piano for the second line and forte for the beginning. Half note, play, play, half note, hold down, play. Sorry, I should have said half note there. Half note, play, play, half note, play, play, half note, play, play, whole note, hold down. So there's 4, and then you can play the repeat with that too. This one's not a hard one because you have 4 beats to get your eyes up here and prepare. Okay, the next one is the All-Star Warm-Up. This is the one you're probably going to spend the most time on because it's fast and it's fun. Kids love to play fast. If you'll notice it, the pattern here, there's a pattern. The bottom note is the same. It's a C. So we're doing the melodic with doing our intervals. And then without a rest, we start in with this hand. And so if you keep time, repeat, it reminds you of the Czerny finger exercises for those of you that have ever done those before. It just repeats. Now, I would start the metronome at 100, maybe a little bit slower, and make sure that they can play in a nice steady rhythm because that is the whole purpose, is accuracy and articulation. Play one phrase at a time, then you can put these two together and then pay attention to that there's not a rest there. But practice these together. They're going to memorize this, and it's the same down here. This is the most important one because it works on our weakest fingers. It works on these. So if you can only practice for 2 minutes, have them do just this one because this one's really important. So I would start at about 100. You can get faster and get all the way up to 140. I think 140 is probably as fast as they can probably take it and still be able to play it. Speed is where the muscle work comes from. The faster you play, believe it or not, that's where the muscle work comes from. So if they start mushing it all up because they're going too fast, have them kind of shake it out with their hands. Just shake out the mistakes. Start again a little bit slower. Use the metronome. I would only move it up 1 or 2 ticks at a time. More than that's not going to be helpful, so just move it up 1 or 2 ticks until they can get closer. Feel free to write on your book how fast that they can go. That way you can remember it the next time that they sit down. And let's see, I think that's about it. Oh, except for the paperwork. And the paperwork is really just the same as what we've been doing. They draw in the notes. They talk about what these things look like. Notice that with the 5th, it's line to line or space to space. The 4th was one of each, just like the 2nd. But with the 5ths, it's like the 3rds, except that there's a bunch of space between. So the child will notice that there's some space between. But their eyes need to begin to discriminate that it's the same thing. It's a line, or it's a space. So they need to be able to recognize those chords, which they can. Kids learn in pictures. We tend to overthink it as adults, but they can learn in pictures. And then the second one is just a little bit more paperwork. They can see how far a 5th is, that you're skipping 3 white keys, and then keep on practicing the names of those ledger lines. All right, have a good week.